Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to the 71st Coppa Sabatini. From Peccioli to Peccioli, 198.9 kilometres of racing in this beautiful part of the world. That is Peccioli, where the race started. Lovely little town, about 50 kilometres southwest of Florence, 30 kilometres southeast of Pisa, in the province of Pisa, in the region of Tuscany. Very beautiful part of the world for bike racing. Population just under 5,000 here in Peccioli. Some lovely little streets and alleyways, cafes, restaurants, a few shops to enjoy as well. Some nice churches as well. The Pieve San Verano, the Chapel of Santa Caterina. The race presentation got underway a little bit early. The racing started this morning, 11:30 local time. And a few of the locals out to support this race departing. The race headed south towards Lajatico, and then makes its way back up north through Peccioli as we continue with the team presentations. My name's Ian Finley. Great to have your company for today's race alongside me, Ian Field. Ian, wonderful to have you here today, and this is building towards what should be quite an interesting last sort of 50, 60 kilometres or so.
It certainly is. We've been getting some updates online, and it looks like a very attacking, aggressive race so far. So really looking forward to getting those live pictures and seeing what the current situation is on the road, because like you say, it'll be about 50, 60 kilometres to go of this race now. And by the looks of things, it's been very attacking, and so hopefully going to see some good aggressive racing towards the end of this as they reach those finishing circuits.
Just seeing the team presentation for Intermarché Circus Wanted. Louis Mente's back racing after an injury at the Tour de France, as is this man, Tadej Pogačar. The Slovenian raced yesterday, finished in fourth place. The Team UAE Emirates were in a pretty good position early on, actually quite late on in the race on the Monte Serra in yesterday's Giro della Toscana. In the end, the race went to Pavel Sivakov, but obviously Pogačar, one of the big names in this race. It was originally announced that he was going to be racing today, as we see UAE Team Emirates at the presentation. Mark Hirschi from Switzerland didn't race yesterday, but he is in the squad for today. Großschartner finished in third place. Formolo in sixth for UAE Team Emirates. Richard Carapaz, I'll get that right today. Apologies for getting that a little wrong at times yesterday. Finished in second place. Again, coming off the back of a little injury at the Tour de France. So his first race yesterday for a while. And he was just pipped by Sivakov. Fantastic jersey as well for Carapaz. Team Cofidis, Guillaume Martin, Simon Yeshik. Some experienced names in the Cofidis squad, Ian.
Yeah, they've got a real strong team today, and Guillaume Martin will be probably their team leader as such, their protected man, but don't write off Lastra as well. He was 19th yesterday, coming off the back of the Arctic race in Norway, which he commentated on. He had third on stage 2, so they've got some strength in depth. But looking at the Ineos Grenadiers, they've got the man in form, Pavel Sivakov, yesterday's winner, second place in Montreal GP at the weekend, just behind Adam Yates. So yeah, look out for that man once again, as we see the Italian champ Velasco in fine form as well. He rode very well recently and picked up that Italian national champs jersey, one of the best jerseys in the peloton, in my opinion.
Certainly an easy one to spot as well. Lutsenko has been a winner here in the past in 2019. Harold Tejada as well. He was in the early break in this race. A break of 5 riders got away. And did get caught, we believe, by a much bigger group that will be joining the live action soon. So the race started out, headed south here in Tuscany, and then looped its way back up through Lajatico about here, and then made its way back up towards Peccioli. As you can see from the graphic, a very bumpy day here at the Coppa Sabatini. One perhaps for the punchers. Make our way onto a second lap. We did 5 laps on the sort of mid part of the race. A lot of climbing in there as well. Then we go on to a finish circuit of 12.3 kilometers, which we do 3 times 12.2 kilometers, and it's a pretty tough finish to this race here, and it's one that we've seen in the past. There's opportunities to spring a surprise or two on this finish.
There certainly are. I think 2,500 meters climbing across the 200 kilometers of racing today, and yeah, very short, sharp climbs along the way, and with that finishing climb, just over 1 kilometre in length, is yeah, quite a kick to it at 5.6% average. So completing that, yeah, 3 times on that finishing circuit after what's come before will be a real test for the riders we see. They rolled out in brilliant, perfect racing conditions this morning, 27 degrees, very light winds from the west, around 5 miles per hour, kind of 8 to 10 kilometers per hour. However, there is a chance of rain. I've got it noted down between 1 and 3 p.m. this afternoon. There is 60-70% chance of rain. So when we go to live pictures, we might be in for a little bit of rain perhaps, but I'm sure those riders don't want that right now.
Well, hopefully not. Yeah, as you say, started in perfect conditions. The unofficial start, the rollouts at 11:20 local time in Peccioli, and the race got underway properly at 11:30, just after. There was a little flurry of activity early on. Certainly did catch that Ethan Hayter, Ineos rider, had a good sprint yesterday, finished in 7th. Did try and get in one of the early moves. That didn't stick. But then a little bit later on, after about 40 kilometers or so, we had 3 riders get away. Harold Tejada, the Colombian from Astana, Kazakhstan. And we had Luca Kovali, 26-year-old Green Project rider. And Lucas Grolier, 23-year-old from France, Total Energies, got away. And they were joined about 4 kilometers later by the rider from US Catel, Azumedi, and another young French rider, Alessio Cialone, from Total Energies as well. We had that group of 5 stuck together for much of the race, but we understand now there's a lot more happening at the front of the race, and we'll bring you up to speed once we get the live pictures of that. The riders, as we can see here on the highlights, the pictures from a little bit earlier. Can the official start just after 11:33 local time. Well, that's the picture. Things right now, we're over 143 kilometers done in the race. And thankfully, Ian, it's still not raining.
It isn't raining, but it looks like the racing has really hotted up. I mean, we had all those breakaway names written down from earlier in the day, and it looks like that has been completely ripped up, and we've got a very elite set of riders at the front of this race now.
Yeah, well, very recognisable jersey in the middle of the screen there. I can see that looks like Sivakov as well from Ineos, clearly carrying that good run of form. But Pogacar's in there, saying obviously had a nice rest period. Didn't quite have the legs yesterday, but he's got a teammate there as well. And that man, Carapaz, is in this group as well. Elite indeed. So it's really all changed from our notes before we went on air.
Yeah, it looks like we've got Sivakov, Guillaume Matin, Hershey, Carapaz, Michael Valgren, Lusenko, and Pogacar. Who else was that? Just tagged on the back. One of the Q36.5 riders I haven't been able to check out just yet. But I would say if I'd highlighted all of the favourites for this race today, they're all represented basically.
Yeah, I've got a list of favourites, and most of them are on there. I did wonder if Filippo Zana would try and get in this group as well, or try and make a move in this race. He hasn't done so yet. There's still a long way to go there, just over a minute 15 ahead, but I think as we see, there's going to be a few riders sort of strung out on the road. There, Mark Hirschi, those Swiss champion bands. Rider, he won this. He won the Giro della Toscana, yesterday's race, in the past. We've got Valgren, who's won here in 2021, and Lutsenko, who won in 2019. So a couple of previous winners in the race.
Looks like we've got George Bennett and Formolo coming across the gap. They're only 21 seconds down on that group ahead, which would put UAE in a very, very strong position. I'd give them 4 riders at the head of this race, and it looked like Pogacar and Hirschi had received that information. It looked like they were just having a bit of a discussion, just having a word, letting each other know what the race situation was behind, and that they weren't going to work in that front group and allow those 2 teammates to come across that gap. I mean, looking at the what's left of the peloton, it isn't much of a peloton at all at 1 minute 23. There will be some teams that have missed out on this one, so it'll be interesting to see who's actually working within that peloton. And yeah, the pace is completely gone out of it as they wait for these 2 UAE riders. There's no point pressing on if you've got passengers such as Hirschi and Pogacar, but now there's 4 UAE at the front. It's going to fall upon their shoulders to do the lion's share of the work within this front group now.
Yeah, if you're another rider in this group, you see those 4 riders and from UAE Team Emirates, and that, I think, as Brian Smith was saying yesterday, they perhaps got the tactics wrong on the climb. They had 4 riders in the group. You're probably going to be expecting UAE Team Emirates to do most of the work. You're certainly not going to make it easy for them, are you? When they've got the strength with the likes of Hirschi, Bennett, Pogacar, Formolo, all up there.
No, exactly. And that final rider, the Q36.5 rider, is Walter Calzoni. So another rider who's shown some really good form recently, but talking about UAE and taking on the majority of the work within this group, they know exactly what they've got to do. George Bennett and Davide Formolo straight to the front of this group and all lining them out, putting them under pressure. Looks like Pogacar might be their team leader today. Obviously, Felix Großschartner got their best position yesterday with that 3rd place for them. But it looks like today Pogacar's the man, sitting further back, perhaps just keeping an eye on Lutsenko and Sivakov, 2 riders in excellent form.
Well, Pogacar saying that adding these races to his programme, building towards the Il Lombardia, the final monument of the season, which, of course, he's won in 2021 and 2022. That's on the 7th of October, and coming here to just get some racing in the legs, and it's going to be some racing over the final 48 kilometres or so, because such an elite group of riders that we've got as we look back at what's left of the peloton, just over a minute behind. And as you say, it'll be interesting to see if anyone does pull. We've got Jaco Alula working on the front of the peloton at the moment. That's Alexander Balmer just leading the bunch at the moment. Back to the front of the race, you can see the riders that are in there. Sivakov in great form, 2nd in Montreal, taking the win yesterday as well. Formolo looked very, very strong yesterday. He certainly did his job for the team.
Looked like there was only really Team Jaco Alula and Yola Kometa team at the front of that very reduced peloton with any sort of numbers and willingness to do any sort of chasing, and that gap, it is coming down as there was a bit of a lull in the action in this front group as they waited for those 2 UAE riders to come across the gap. So the gap did fall ever so slightly. That will give the group behind kind of a little bit of kind of motivation, seeing that gap drop. However, I'm sure it will stabilise and perhaps begin to shift out once again once these 2 UAE riders kind of get their heads down and start working well together. But lots of discussion going on within the team now. I'm sure they'll be trying to work out who has the best legs on the day and who's best going all in for.
10 riders in that leading group at the moment with just under a minute's advantage. But Jaco Alula starting to pull pretty hard on the front of the bunch behind. So just in that lead group, we've got Sivakov, Lutsenko, Martin, Carapaz, Valgren, Pogacar, Bennett, Hirschi, Formolo, and Calzoni. Have they got organised? You can see that it's really starting to string out here. The pace has gone up in that group. And we're on just a flat section at the moment. We've got a little bit of a climb coming up the Terricciola. It's just a short climb, around about 3.7 kilometres at an average of 3.1%. That comes up in a few kilometres. But we're not done with the climbing after that. We descend and then we go on to the finish circuit fairly soon after that. 3 laps of the 12.2 finish circuit with that climb into Peccioli as well. So still a lot of racing to go in this one. And if the bunch keep dropping that gap ever so slowly at the moment, but it's not a done deal yet. So 50 seconds at the moment. UAE, as expected, Ian, just pulling hard, starting to get a bit organised on the front of this leading group.
Exactly. It looks like Formolo and Bennett being sacrificed for the good of their team leaders, Pogacar and Hirschi, today. As we came live, obviously those two were distanced and came across the gap on their own up to this leading group. So I imagine they were distanced on the previous climb when perhaps this group got away. And so perhaps the two weaker riders as such from that team, and they're just going to sacrifice themselves now and just get that kind of stabilise that gap and get it as high as possible so that their two team leaders can fight this one out for victory. But Jaco Alula doing an excellent job in trying to bring this one down. I think it's now or never for them, really. If you don't bring it down and kind of get it to a point where perhaps, I'm presuming their team leader today is Zana, to try and jump across on one of these short punchy climbs. I'm sure he'd like to think he'd be able to get across kind of a 20-second gap maybe on one of these climbs. They're not full all out at the front of this bike race, so perhaps being able to jump across on the next climb, but they've got to bring this gap down a little bit further before anyone thinks about jumping across that gap. Astana doing a brilliant job just in wheels 4 and 5 there, just making sure that it's limited to only 3 riders working on the front of this peloton. Q36.5 lined up behind as well. But interesting to see not too many teams have missed out on the front of this one.
Well, Astana at the front of the bunch, but they do have Lutsenko up ahead in the group, so they're obviously just trying to disrupt things a little bit. I think that's what you were saying, Ian, and just let Jaco Alula do the work. There is Alexander Balmer, as you can see, the Swiss rider. He's been on the mountain bike World Cup quite a bit this season. Was 7th at the World Championships in mountain bike up at Glen Tress. Then I believe he headed to the Arctic race in Norway, which you were commentating on. So mixing up road and mountain bike, very strong rider. Gianni Moscon there from Astana. He's got a lot of experience, 29 years old now. Didn't finish yesterday's race, and a little bit of racing since the Tour de France. Did the Renewy Tour, finished 57th overall in that one. So some experienced riders, mixture of youth as well in that main bunch. But the leaders at the moment, 4 riders from Team UAE Emirates, looking to probably, I think it's fair to say, Pogacar will be the protected rider. But Mark Hirschi, Ian, is in decent form as well. Didn't race yesterday and defend his Giro della Toscana title, but he was over in Quebec for the Grand Prix of Quebec. Finished 8th in Quebec and then 10th in Montreal. So decent form on the World Tour races there, and he's given himself an extra day probably to get over the jet lag of that hop across the pond. But if Pogacar's not quite feeling it today, he's still riding into a bit of form, then maybe Hirschi is their man for today.
Precisely. I think Pogacar coming in with kind of a little unknown form, just having not raced for a while. I'm sure he had some downtime after the World Championships. After that individual time trial at the World Championships, he just looked a little bit burnt out, which is not unsurprising. He didn't have the perfect preparation for the Tour de France this year, and obviously went super deep in that final week trying to win that Tour, but obviously came up a little short in the end. Still had the legs for the road race, but once again at the World Championships must have gone super deep in those particularly attritional World Championships this year, and it just looked a little bit burnt out come the individual time trials. So I'm sure he went on holiday. I'm sure I saw on Instagram that he'd been on holiday, taking a little bit of downtime, and now has begun his build-up now for Il Lombardy, like you said. So these races, absolutely perfect preparation for that. Not quite as difficult, but very attritional racing. Lots of short, sharp, punchy climbs, and normally doesn't take long for Pogacar to get up to race speed. So I would expect him to have better legs today than yesterday, surprisingly enough. It's just the way that kind of he works, but what a backup plan Hershey is. Like you said, 2 top 10s while out in those Canadian races, and looked super strong, and even kind of working a little bit for Adam Yates at times as he went on to win the GP Montreal, that second race of the 2. So yeah, what a pairing they've got in that leading group.
We see Carapaz pulling third wheel at the moment. He's got company as well, which is certainly going to help. Yesterday he had to try to do it on his own and just pipped by a stronger rider from Team Ineos Grenadiers in Pavel Sivakov in this group as well. But like we saw in yesterday's race, Formolo on the front, pulling hard and really driving this on. The gap has just increased a little bit. The riders were on the climb up to the Tericiola climb. It's just a short, sharp blast up, 3.7 kilometres, and as you said, quite similar terrain to Il Lombardia. So it's really, there's a lot of riders obviously preparing for that, getting used to this. It's these sort of conditions. It's going to be, you would think it'd be a little cooler by the time we get round to October in this part of the world. It's Il Lombardia. It's just a little further north, so you'd expect it to be full autumn. It's a perfect place to come out and prepare for the final monument of the season, and the way it's all shaping up today, we can see there's a lot of riders that are focusing on this final monument in October. It is going to be a special one. There is the Group 56 seconds back. It is still Jaco Alula on the front. Dimarchi's been pulling hard. Moscon's been working there for Astana. There's 2 Jaco Alula riders and 2 Astana Kazakhstan riders at the front. They appear to have been doing most of the work here, Ian.
Yeah, the 2 Jaco Alula riders, just, yeah, everything falling onto their shoulders now to try and bring this one back. Just saw on that climb the gap going out ever so slightly. I think that's from where Baumer just slipped back ever so slightly and allowed those Astana riders to kind of infiltrate ever so slightly, and then when Dimarchi kind of flicked his elbow, there was a little lull in the action as the Astana Moscon was reluctant to come through for obvious reasons. It takes a little bit of time to Baumer to kind of come back round and get working again. So just, that's the way a team can kind of disrupt the chase as such. Sat third, fourth wheel, and yeah, if a rider does slip back, they slot into that second, third position. It just kind of can disrupt the chase, and even if it stalls for kind of 2 or 3 seconds, that's almost 1 or 2 seconds given advantage to that leading group. So good job from the Astana boys, helping their team leader Lusenko out in front, who is one of those riders just seems to come into form year upon year. Come September, come these Italian races, just seems to pick up 1 or 2 wins almost every year at these sorts of events.
It's nice to see as well. I have Valgren in the mix as well, the Danish rider, 31 years old. He's been a pretty nasty crash last year, and it's good to see him back towards the front of the race. Finished in 12th yesterday, winning this race in 2021. Knows these roads well, does Valgren. See what he can do today, but he could be perhaps riding a little bit for Carapaz today. I think Carapaz showing yesterday that he had the legs in his first race back after the Tour, and a nasty crash at the Tour. So two very strong riders on paper, at least, Ian, for EF Education.
Yeah, certainly. I think kind of when I noted down the names of the riders from EF, I noted down a considerable number from just that one team: Valgren, Cepeda, Simon Carr, Carapaz and Padun. So yeah, they had a number of riders almost to choose from, and like you say, it's great to see Valgren back. He was actually on the kind of the development squad of EF Easy Post Education this season, but obviously he's allowed to ride up for a certain number of days for the full World Tour squad, and he's been using those to really kind of show that he's back. As you said, 12th yesterday, I commentated him at Tour de Lane, and he was doing some awesome huge pulls for the team during that event, and it was almost like he was still training, he was still building up, and it looks like he's come into some really good form at the end of this season. And it's taken an awful long time to come back from that horrendous crash, but it looks like Michael Valgren is back, and it's just brilliant to see. And I'm sure Richard Carapaz is delighted to have such a strong teammate join him in this leading group to help him out towards the end of this one.
That could be the difference today for Carapaz. Valgren as well. We just got a little shot of Pogačar there. You can see who our organisers think perhaps some of the favourites for this one. Well, 3 UAE Team Emirates: Pogačar, Hershey, Grosschartner, Zana, who we saw missing out on the break, but Jaco Alula working hard. Ethan Hayter sprinting well yesterday, but Sivakov in the leading group right now. If it all comes together, perhaps towards the line, Ethan Hayter has got a really good sprint on him. So who knows, as we enjoy these beautiful pictures of Peccioli, the Muro to Peccioli next climb. It's just another one, just under a kilometre. And that gap here now, out over a minute again. Suggests UAE Team Emirates. And this man, Formolo, is doing a huge turn.
He certainly is, and yeah, the gap's only going one way now. These two riders on the front of this group, they know exactly what they've got to do. They've just got to put their heads down and open up this gap as much as possible across the kind of next kind of 10, 15, 20 kilometres perhaps. They know they're not going for the race win today. They're just setting this up for their team leaders. You see Carapaz tucking down, trying to save as much energy as possible, and it kind of puts all the team leaders, from even though they're all from different teams, almost in the same position right now, because they're all able to just sit in line, kind of take the draft from those first two UAE riders, and everything's going to kick off come those shorter, sharper climbs towards the end of this one. And they kind of all know that this is kind of the long, flat section of the course right now as they're heading back towards the next set of climbs.
Won't be long till we're on the finishing circuit as well. It's relatively flat apart from the climb up to the finish line. So there's opportunities to, especially when you've got your teammates in there, to perhaps get a little bit of respite in there. But this is going to be a fast finish in racing for just approaching 4 hours, done over 160 kilometres of this race. So in that, it's fair to say, still pretty hot weather, 27, 28 degrees. So your nutrition strategy's got to be absolutely key. Just on this next little climb here, a little kick up, we can see the leading group, Pogačar and
Hershey on the attack.
Yes, Hershey there. And Carapaz has got a problem there, a bike issue for Carapaz. His chain just popped off, perhaps.
Yeah, chains come off. Chains come off, and that's awful timing for him. They're on the Muro di Piccolo. It's only 900 metres in length, as we see a replay now. Up out the saddle for Carapaz, and just, that's a real strange one. Just didn't look like he was changing gear. Didn't look like he was doing anything out of the ordinary. The chains just come off the front ring there. As I was saying, they're on the Muro de Piccolo, 900 meters in length, but it is an average gradient of 10.2%. And you see now Pavel Sivakov coming across the gap, the man with form coming across to Hershey. Pogačar in the saddle, trying to limit his losses, it looks like, on this climb, but Hershey up out the saddle. And I'm sure if Sivakov was to join Hershey at the front, it means that Hershey probably wouldn't do any work initially with Pogačar so close behind. But great ride from the Q36.5 rider Calzoni, coming past Pogačar towards the top of this climb now.
Well, Pogačar dropping back, but Mark Hershey sends the opportunity, and now we've got Sivakov and Hershey in just a little pairing in front of the rest of this group. And Sivakov was in this situation yesterday. He had Carapaz for company. A little look over the shoulder again from Hershey. I'm not sure if they realised that Carapaz had a problem, but as you said, Ian, the timing couldn't be worse on that climb for Carapaz. And now these two exceptionally strong riders going up. Love this little stretch of climb right through the cafes. What a great place to watch a bike race as well. Sit with your coffee through the town. Absolutely fantastic, and good to see decent crowd as well. And these are such brutal, short, sharp climbs as well. As you said, just over 10% on that last one. We've got 36.5 to go. Could do with a little look behind to see if these two have managed to, how much distance they've put on the rest of that, what was the leading group.
Yeah, probably 4 or 5 seconds as they crested that one. It looked like Pogačar and Calzoni, but it looks like Matan has come across as well, perhaps. So it gives Hershey the right to kind of look round and say, oh, I've got a teammate behind, and sit on Sivakov, because, yeah, right now I'm not entirely sure you want to go toe-to-toe with Pavel Sivakov, the form he's in at the moment. So perhaps Hershey will look round and get the nod that Pogačar isn't too far behind, and perhaps just sit on, use that, and this might see these two groups coming back together.
And George Bennett just a little further down the road as well for UAE Team Emirates. So as you say, it may all come back together. The last check we had, Carapaz was 18 seconds back. Formolo 30 seconds back. So these two have got a few seconds, and it is Mark Hershey on the front right now. Sivakov just looking over his shoulder. I mean, it must be amazing to feel like he does right now. It's just great form, and it would be impressive to see him take this race as well.
Absolutely.
Still 35 to go. And there's the view back.
Yeah, that doesn't look like 15, 16 seconds as the TV is showing. Much more kind of 5, 6 seconds perhaps. Interesting little note to this and the Montreal GP is, of course, Sivakov has signed for UAE for next season. So
indeed, yeah.
Read into that what you will in these situations.
Let's not get into it too much. Enjoy the race. Well, Carapaz trying to work hard to get back in. Lucky that chain came off when it did. If it was going to happen, he'd probably rather it happened when it did than with a lot less racing to go. Richard Carapaz, the man from Ecuador, just trying to get back in touch with that group ahead, and maybe, Ian, just maybe this all might come back together.
It looks like it might do. They've got kind of a longer, flatter stretch as they head to that kind of finishing circuit now. So Hershey's had a look round, and I'm sure he can see that Pogačar is in that group of 4 just behind. But that is some ride from Richard Carapaz. He must have lost probably 5 or 6 seconds in getting his chain back on, and then had to get going on those very steep gradients. And he's almost back to that group of 4. So, yeah, we saw the form he had yesterday in that race where he went, well, until 1 kilometre to go, he was finally dropped by Sivakov. As we see Valgren trying to come across as well to join his teammate in that chase group of 4. But yeah, as I was saying, we saw the form he had yesterday, and to be able to ride across a gap like that, That's super impressive. He's going to have a small doubt in his mind, though, across the final 33 kilometres of racing, of whether that chain's going to have a mishap once again. There might not be, from memory. The final climb doesn't look too steep, so perhaps won't need that little ring. That was perhaps the final climb where they will be using the little ring within this race. So perhaps he's probably going to keep it in the big ring for those climbs coming up, just to try and limit the chances of that same problem happening again. The next climb that we do hit in 8 kilometres time will be that finishing climb, so the riders will get a good look at that finishing climb before the end of this one.
Finishing climb just over 5% in gradient, so a little easier than what they've just tackled there. And it's still Sivakov and Hershey with about 5, 6, 7 seconds, it says, on the road. I did think it might have all can come back together. There's still a bit of time on this flat section before the climb. As you said, 8 kilometres to go. But they are working well together, these two riders, and they're starting to just, once you get over those little crests and just get a little bit out of sight from the group as well, can make that little bit of difference.
It certainly can, and also disrupting the chase behind is Tadej Pogačar. He's obviously not working because he's got a teammate ahead, so they're in a really good position as a team. So we do see Michael Valgren. That gives a sense of kind of what's happening within this chase group. They're not full gas. Valgren's been able to close down that gap on that short little kicker, but right now it kind of means that they have all come together, so perhaps there should be a bit more cohesion within this group now. No real reason, apart from Pogačar, not to kind of give it their all to get back to the front of this bike race.
Well, that could work out nicely for Pogačar's teammates up ahead, Mr. Hershey. Not talk too much about Luchenko, the Astana Kazakhstan rider in the group here, and he knows how to win on these roads, and as long as that gap is hovering round about 10-11 seconds, Luchenko might be the type of rider excuse me, well, what a time to have a coughing fit in the middle of a sentence. Just wonder if Luchenko might be a kind of rider that will try and bridge across as we get closer.
Yeah, these small climbs towards the end really kind of provide launch pads for riders to go on the attack or to try and jump across to the next group on the road kind of thing. So yeah, 1.4 kilometres in length, and like you said, 5.6% average gradient. It does kick slightly towards the top, so perfect opportunity really to kind of attack over the top of that one, to jump across a small gap to the group ahead. But they have got to limit the gap. Kind of only looks like it's going out at the moment to those two riders ahead. But yeah, Luchenko, one of those riders that, like you said, knows how to win a bike race. He's a previous winner of this race. He's had a few wins already this season, including Getchko earlier, which is not too dissimilar to this race. Short, punchy climbs, finishes on a short climb as well. So yeah, watch out for that man to try and make some moves from behind. But right now, these leading two riders working very well together. Mark Hershey in that very aerodynamic position that we first saw good few years ago now at the Tour de France, where he won a number of stages, showing off that excellent position on the bike. And Sivakov, well, he's just got pure engine at the moment, pure form, which is carrying him to kind of many podiums in the last few races.
And the finish as well should suit those two riders, but it's going to suit quite a few riders in this group, or this group here, this chasing group, that are now, at least with the information we have, 17 seconds back. They don't look like particularly well organised, but Carapaz has got Valgren for company in this one. It's good to see, of course, the Walter Calzoni, the Q36 rider in there. He's put together a very strong race today. See Valgren on the front at the moment, just looking over his shoulder. Yeah,
Pogačar just infiltrating ever so slightly, holding that second position, and yeah, just not making it easy for that chase group, doing nothing wrong, not really getting in anyone's way, but it just kind of hinders the chase as such, and that gap grows further to 20 seconds. I think anything 20 seconds or more on that final climb just means that someone isn't going to be able to just jump across. So yeah, those front two riders doing a brilliant job right now, as we see 44, 45 kilometers an hour on the flat, these two riders.
Well, we've got 3 climbs to go. We go over into this finishing circuit, and I'm wondering if maybe on the penultimate go around, due to there's that long flat section, if on the penultimate go we'll see anyone launch an attack there, or at least try and bridge across. It will depend perhaps on just how much Hershey and Sivakov have got by the time that we get to the climb.
Yeah, this long flat section is on the finishing circuit, so they have got to do this each time between that finishing climb as such. So that's going to kind of almost discourage riders going on the attack towards the end of this one, as we see the UAE DS coming up. Pogačar doesn't look happy about something, gesticulating about something within the team. Sounds like the radio isn't working, perhaps. So yes, some communication troubles within the UAE team. A wry smile. Perhaps the DSs were telling him just to sit on the back rather than getting involved in that chase, but I'm sure he was slowing it down rather than speeding up the chase, so I don't really know what their problem is.
Maybe we will find out after the race as Guillaume Martin comes through, along with Alexei Lutsenko, the 2 EF Education Easy Post riders. Valgren and Carapaz were working on the front of that group. It's Pogačar just making his way back up after that little chat. I did enjoy the wry smile across to the camera after the chat, but he's looking relaxed. He's here, obviously. I think he wants to win every race he enters. He's one of those kind of riders, but he's here with perhaps a bigger goal in mind on the 7th of October to get himself in prime shape for that. Stunning countryside around in this part of the world. Talking about it with Brian Smith yesterday, and it's a place I've been lucky enough to spend a bit of time in. Beautiful roads. Great for riding. Beautiful day for it. Valgren on the front again with Carapaz.
I think given what happened on that previous steep climb, Valgren knows perhaps that he's the weaker of the 2 teammates, him and Carapaz, in that chasing group, so he's got to do maybe a little bit more of the work. And this long straight road means that they can never really get out of sight. The riders behind can always see the 2 riders just ahead, pulling the cars out from the gap. So yeah, commissaires think this gap's coming down ever so slightly.
Yeah, see the UAE car just pulled over to the side. Sivakov doesn't give too much away, but this is a hard pull for these 2 on the front, and this chasing group getting reasonably well organised. These 6 riders in this group: Lutsenko, Martin, Carapaz, Valgren, Pogačar and Calzoni in this group. It's Carapaz right now doing the work. I think is that Pogačar second. Second wheel, I'll say that, and now it just looks completely unorganised.
Yeah, if these riders want to win this bike race, they can't afford to do it. It's Lutsenko in second wheel, refusing to come through, almost just stretching out the back. He's a wily old fox. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he was just trying to save something to be able to jump across on the next climb, or he's being genuine and he's just feeling rather empty and just feels as though he can't really pull through, can't really do a big turn, and he's going to slow things down if he does go through. So bit of a strange one right now. It's that kind of that group 2 situation that we talk about so often, that yeah, riders end up just trying to miss a turn, not give it their all to bring the two riders ahead back, and it ends up this situation where you think it should be coming back together and it's only going one way, as the two leaders now hit our finishing climb, so we get a good idea of what the riders are facing kind of two more times after this, and then that final time will be up to the finish line, 1.4 kilometers up to the finish line. It's got multiple hairpins. The direction they're heading is predominantly a tailwind, but with these hairpins it does kind of end up being a crosswind majority of the way, all the way up to that final kick up to the line. It's a great shot there of those hairpins on offer for these riders.
Yeah, that shows exactly what you were saying. It's a lovely little climb up finish, but it is one that if you could see a rider go for it on that final time up, and maybe the time before, as Hershey and Sivakov still out in front by about 30 seconds now. Climb at 5%, round about 5%, so it's enough to test them after what has been 174, 175 kilometers of racing already today, and they know they've got to do it another couple of times after this as well. But if you're going to put a little kick in at the front, which I think these two have done, this is the place to do it, because as you've said, Ian, we've still got that long flat section after the climb, which is going to make life pretty difficult for these two on the front to try and hold that lead, especially if that chase group of 6 riders do get organised.
Looks like that gap's going out once they've hit this climb, so yeah, you'd said these are the two strongest guys in this bike race. They left that group behind on that very steep, short climb, so showing the form and the legs that they've got today, and once we hit some harder gradients, it looks like that gap's going out further. Sivakov looks very, very strong. Hershey in the wheel looked like he was working reasonably hard just to hold the wheel earlier on in that climb, but there we see it over the finishing line with 2 laps to go.
Looks like Valgren has been dropped from this group. So Carapaz has lost his teammates. I think you were saying that Valgren perhaps was slightly weaker today of the two EF Education riders.
Yeah, just a little bit weaker on the climbs, a little bit heavier than Carapaz, and didn't quite have the power to get over that very steep climb previously, so it did look like he was doing some longer, stronger turns on that flat section just to try and limit the gap or even try and bring it down, but ultimately wasn't able to, and that gap has increased further over the top of that climb onto the descent now, and then once again they'll have that long flat section as we see Valgren on the climb. Certainly distanced from that chase group now, and I wouldn't have thought he'd be able to get back in contention to help out Richard Carapaz towards the end of this, but it's going to be a long 24 kilometres left for him. He's still obviously got a top 10 on the cards up for grabs.
Well, as we were saying, good to see him though at the front of a race again today. Not quite got the legs, but after the injury last year and coming back to form, and there'll be quite a few positives, I would say, to take for Valgren today. Not going to defend his title in this race from 2021 as we're on the descent, and Carapaz at the back of the group right now. That is now thinned down to 5 riders. Luchenko still there, Guillaume Martin, Carapaz as we're saying, Tadej Pogacar and Walter Calzoni. Young Italian rider, 22 years old, Q36 rider.
George Bennett obviously did all that work to establish that gap for the leading group, and yeah, now he's going to have a very lonely ride as well. Formolo was with him at some point, but he's obviously been dropped. So we see the 2 leaders now off that very fast descent down onto the flatter section. They will loop around and join that long, straight, main road section once again is a slight crosswind for the riders, so certainly not assisting but not hampering too badly. And as I said earlier, the wind isn't too strong, only around about 5 to 8 miles per hour as the riders have a little word to each other. I'm sure, yeah, it's both in their best interest to work well together, establish this gap and grow it further towards the end. I'm sure these two will try and stick together for as long as possible, but that gap ever increasing. 37 seconds now.
Well, it's starting to look like it could be these two battling it out for the win today. Sivakov, man in form. He's a tall rider as well, isn't he, compared to Hershey. Very, very powerful rider. 26 years old. Some good stage races this year as well. Great all-rounder, and I think he's going to fit pretty well into Team UAE Emirates. Here comes what's left of the bunch. We did see Jaco Alula try and pull when the group was leading group was all together and about a minute ahead. It looks like Formolo's made his way back to that group, which will give him a little bit of company over the final 21 kilometers or so. I think there'll be a little bit of disappointment that Zana's missed out today, Ian.
Yeah, almost certainly. I think he showed yesterday that he's got good form, he's got legs to be there in that front group, and he obviously missed out. He obviously didn't see what happened in terms of that group getting away, but perhaps some bad positioning or bad luck when that group was forming, and yeah, it means he's missed out today, and his poor teammates have had a pretty tough, rough ride trying to bring that gap down to this leading group. But yeah, right now they're almost 3.5 minutes back, and they just need to see out the last 20 odd kilometres of racing and fight it out for probably what is kind of a top 10 position still on the line. Ben Swift in there, Magnus Sheffield in there still for Ineos Grenadiers, so some good riders still left in that peloton as such.
Guillaume Martin taking his turn on the front. Alexei Lutsenko. Well, if the gap keeps drifting out as it is doing, Lutsenko, Carapaz, anyone in this group that had eyes on a victory today, making it a little harder for themselves, still potentially could be brought back. But 40 seconds, 20 kilometers to go, and these two still looking strong. Seeing a lot of turns on the front from Sivakov. I wonder if he's thinking Hershey's maybe not quite got it on that final climb. You did say, Ian, that on that climb up to Peccioli, Sivakov was looking a little bit stronger, and Hershey, though, sitting on the wheel, and it's a great wheel to sit behind. You get a good slipstream behind Sivakov due to his size.
You certainly do. I think ordinarily, looking at the two riders, Hershey's very punchy, very good at uphill sprint finishes, but sometimes form is form and strength outplays that in the end. And yeah, it just looked like Hershey was struggling ever so slightly, just a little bit more body roll kind of on that finishing climb just to hold the wheel of Sivakov. And what we also have to take into account is how much these flat sections in between the climbs takes out of riders. This section of the course is obviously going to suit Sivakov more than Hershey, so perhaps, yeah, more energy being expended by Hershey just to take turns with Sivakov, but looks like he's keeping his turns just a little bit shorter, doing the right thing, just trying to kind of save a little bit of energy here and there against his rival, because he knows how strong Sivakov is right now after his weekend performances and winning yesterday as well, being able to just ride away from Carapaz on that very small kind of almost motorway bridge is where he launched his attack, so he doesn't need much gradient, much help from the terrain to be able to distance someone, and I'm sure Hershey will be well aware of that come the final few kilometres of this race.
Hershey does come through, take a turn on the front now, and I'm wondering if Hershey's thinking, well, Sivakov had to put a big effort in yesterday. He's doing it again today, and maybe just, as you say, just take a little flick of the elbow. It is definitely a shorter turn. A little nod there from Sivakov, perhaps. So that was pretty quick. Maybe some tactics, a little bit of gamesmanship coming into this one from Hershey. But you got to do what you got to do to win a bike race. It's everyone for themselves out there now. No teams for support, and the gap it's growing out, pushing 50 seconds now with 17 kilometers. It's looking less and less likely anyone is going to close it, and the win is going to be fought between these two riders.
Precisely. I think these are the strongest two in the race. From where they launched their attack, the strongest came to the fore, and these two, she can't believe it's his turn to do another turn once again already. But as I was saying, the strongest two attacked, and the strongest two were able to distance themselves from the rest of the group. I think the only person within that chasing group there was a question mark about is Richard Carapaz, obviously having that mechanical at the worst possible time once the race was truly kicking off on that kind of 10% gradient ramp that the riders did. So yeah, I can't see that chase group coming back, and it looked like last time we saw the morale had gone. They're all pretty tired, all on their knees. This is almost a 200-kilometre race. 2,500 metres of climbing, and come the final 17 kilometres, everyone is feeling it in the legs.
Well, that is where we're heading for the penultimate time. You can see the Pieve di San Verano on the top of the little hill where Peccioli sits, built between end of the 11th, beginning of the 12th century. Lovely part of the world. Well, the gap nearly out to a minute. There's a rider just drifting off the back. Are they going to make connection again? They have. So we've still got our 5 riders in the chase group, or the second group on the road. Luchenko, Martin, Carapaz, Pogacar and Calzoni.
Yeah, that gap almost up to a minute, so Commissaires allowing the team cars and the neutral service cars all the way through to these leading 2 riders. Pogacar just off the back slightly of that chase group. With Pogacar, you never know what he's doing. Whether he's just a little bit bored or playing around to the cameras or something, but certainly didn't look like he was being dropped. Just perhaps a lapse of concentration, or perhaps been back to the team car, getting those final instructions before they went up to the leading 2 to have a word with Mark Hershey. Just little words of encouragement, a knowing look from Pavel Sivakov, looking across to who will be a DS for him next year.
Back with the second group on the road. Calzoni, Q36 rider, taking his turn on the front.
See the fatigue within that group. Calzoni almost unable to speed up to come through to do his turn. Lusenko always rolls the gear slightly, but looked like he was rolling it a little bit more than normal. So yeah, plenty of fatigue in the legs of the riders behind. 2 team cars now. Looks like the 2 DSs having a word, perhaps trying to plot things out. How can they possibly get back to the front of this bike race? But right now it's perhaps a little more than just tactics. It's what the riders have got left in the tank at this point.
The gap did drop by a few seconds, but as we saw, Hershey was having a chat with the team car. So you'd expect maybe a few seconds to drop there, and just a couple of kilometers or so until these 2 leading riders are back on the climb into Peccioli for the final time. Those 1.4 kilometers to the top at 5.6%. And now it is really just head down, get this section out of the way. Wonder if they'll actually enjoy the climb a little more than these big wide open roads. Maybe not, but this sort of terrain really suiting Sivakov. He can use his size, his power on this section. And he's certainly doing that. Hershey taking another turn. Very contrasting styles at the moment between the two riders. Not going to read too much into that. The gap out to 50 seconds again.
Yeah, looking at the two riders, it did look like Sivakov was the strongest on the climb last time up, but right now on this flatter section, looks like Hershey still got some good leg speed versus Sivakov just rolling the gear ever so slightly more. It's normally a telltale sign of kind of how fresh a rider feels as such. So yeah, Hershey looks like he's still got some good leg speed in there, perhaps just bluffing ever so slightly with these shorter turns and thinking about the final climb, thinking about this next climb even, not wanting to let Sivakov slip away perhaps with one lap remaining.
Well, our leaders approaching the climb about a kilometre or so into Peccioli. We've seen it once already. Hairpins on the way up into the town. We'll get a bit of support as well. Quite a bit of this race is not ideally suited for spectators to get involved, but once we hit the climb, you get that little bit of encouragement, which I'm sure always helps as well. So 13.5 to go, and now we start to go back up the climb into Peccioli. Came at me a little bit quicker than I was expecting there, but
yeah, now we're on that finishing circuit, only 12.2 kilometres per lap. It comes round pretty quickly once they've got this climb out of the way. It's a very fast descent which knocks off a few kilometres rather quickly. Then that flat section, it seems as though it dragged on the previous lap, but this time round it looks like they've got across it pretty quickly, working well together. As we see once again Hershey just ever so subtle movements on the bike, not desperate to come through to do his turn, gets up out the saddle, stretch the legs, stretch the back ever so slightly, and Sivakov just sits there pushing away these enormous watts that we know he's got, rounding one of those hairpins and making their way up to the next hairpin. Hershey looking down, just checking the speed, checking the watts, no doubt. Just yeah, feels like there's a lot of fatigue build up within the rider's legs at this point.
Well, there would be after nearly 190 kilometres of racing. See a few greats of Italian cycling on the banner there.
Yeah, I was looking back at previous winners of this race. It's got an unbelievable palmarès.
Some list, isn't it?
It is. I just noted down Moser, Bugno, Fondriest, Chiapucci, Rees, Taffy, Schmil, Bettini, Ulrich, Gilbert, Rico, Colbrelli. I know a few of those have got a little asterisk next to their name within the results, but it's still a huge name list of riders. So it shows kind of the history of this race.
Race first ran in 1952. Moser taking the win in 1978 as we see these leading two that have got nearly a minute again, and they'll take the bell. I think it was the 2019 edition that when Luchenko won, there was a rider that got the count wrong. I think it's fair to say, but no danger for these two. They know it's just over 12 kilometres. They've got a minute to play with. Clearly the strongest two riders in the race. The group behind, not going to close them in now. Now we start to think about how it's going to play out here now. We know that Hershey's has got a good uphill sprint on him, as you've been saying, Ian, but does Sivakov try, a little bit like he did yesterday, very different terrain to the finish, to try and get ahead of Hershey a little bit earlier and make it not come down to a sprint? Any guesses on what we might see playing out on the final lap?
Interesting move from Carapaz here, just over the top of this penultimate climb, using... oh, he didn't think it was the finish, did he?
Well, I hope not. Did seem to get a bit of a shock at when he looked across to the bell.
Oh no, I think he might have thought that was the last lap.
He might have done, yeah. He was giving it a really big dig, wasn't he? Just towards the line, and thinking third place might be up, and they sort of dropped off immediately.
Yeah, I was just commenting. I thought big attack, perhaps the final moment to, kind of break this group up into a smaller working group and take the strongest riders away to form kind of a smaller group that could work together to try and close this gap down across this final lap. But as it turns out, it looks like he might have just thought that was the final lap and that they were racing for the final spot on the podium.
Well, timely after me just mentioning that it was 2019 where we saw that happen. Maybe we'll find out after the race. So with under 11 to go, here she takes his turn on the front, and this, as we've been saying, as you've seen, long drag back. It's pretty flat until we hit the climb again for the final time. And this group has started to spread out a little bit, as you'd expect on the descent. Carapaz just a little bit further back right now after expending a pretty heavy effort, it's fair to say, on what was the penultimate run into Peccioli.
The one thing that has done is knocked 15 seconds very quickly off that time gap between the leading group and now these three riders. Martin, Lusenko and Pogačar just well spotted. That motorbike stopped on the left-hand side of the road. Yeah, Pogačar just marshalling things. So, but that gap falling, and interesting that the leading two riders, this is the moment on this long flat section. I'm sure they're going to be very wary of attacks coming from each other, not wanting to expend too much energy on this flat run-in before that final climb. So perhaps a very small glimmer of hope for those chasing riders, perhaps, but I wouldn't have thought these two leading riders would be silly enough to let that gap fully close. And with Pogačar on the back of these two, it's going to kind of discourage them ever so slightly, giving 100% to the chase.
Well, on these roads as well, they can see the gap as well. They can see the cars, the bikes, and Pogačar will just no doubt disrupt things a little bit and maybe not take his start. Is that him looking across to where the two leaders are? I think it is.
Yeah, they take a really hard left-hand turn, and the riders have been able to look across and see exactly where that leading duo is. But conversely, the leading duo will be able to look back and see how much closer the chasing trio are compared to the previous lap. I'm sure that will give them a little bit of emphasis to keep driving this one a little bit longer before they start looking at each other before that final climb. I'd have thought, looking at the different riders in the lead of this one, Sivakov will probably want to go a little bit longer than Hershey, try and wind it up from a long way out and drop Hershey before that final kind of 100 metres up to the line where it really kicks. There will be a wind coming from the rider's left-hand shoulder in the final few 100 metres as they make that final turn. So I'd have thought whoever's on the front will stay pinned up against the barriers on the right-hand side of the road, the rider's right-hand side of the road, the left-hand side of the road, as the finishing camera will look at it. So some subtle tactics to take into account if it does come down to those final 100 metres.
Just a little rise here. It's one of the only little bumps in this section before we hit the climb. 8 kilometres to go. Sivakov looking to double up here this weekend. It's not the weekend, is it? It's been Wednesday, Thursday. So used to sport being on the weekends. So there's the main bunch. And well back now, just on a gentle ride in towards the finish. Over 5 minutes back now. If Sivakov takes it, he'll take the little bonus prize that's on offer for winning the best place rider in terms of points from the yesterday's race and today's race. The Challenge Toscana Memorial Alfredo Martini. 50 points for a win yesterday. 50 points for a win again today, and I think 1,500 euros I think is the prize for that one. The best place rider over the 2 races. 7 to go.
Does look like Martin and Lysenko a little bit more keen and energised on this lap now that they've shed some of the other riders from this chase group. And we see that gap falling further down to 34 seconds. So there was some games going on in that chasing group. They weren't all on their knees as perhaps I initially thought. So a little bit more energy left in the tank, and yeah, that gap coming down. But as you can see, still a long way on the actual road due to the fast, flat nature of the running.
And that group of 3 still got Pogacar in there, who may just make it a little tricky. I think it's all going to come down to Luchenko and Martin if they want to have any chance at all. 35 seconds and 6.2 to go. But these 2, they'll be on the radio. They'll be aware. Well, it's going to be interesting to see just how both of these riders approach the final climb. And as you said, if Sivakov is going to try and go for a long one, go early. Back to Group 2, still 36 seconds back. Pogacar just on the 3rd wheel. Guillaume Martin, shoulders down, driving hard. But we're running out of road if they want to catch up. I think it's unlikely, but as you said, Ian, there's just a tiny chance if they could get organised. But it's really 2 riders that are doing the work here.
Yeah, two against 2 as such, and just in the final bit of headwind section of this circuit, it looked like Sivakov perhaps had got the word from the team car that the gap was coming down, because it looked like he was doing a bit of an extra longer, more sustained kind of turn on the front. But it looks like now they have made that left-hand turn at that final roundabout, so they will have a crosswind all the way back now. We can see our finishing town in the distance up on top of the hill, and so they'll just have a crosswind section all the way now until 1.4 kilometres to go, where they make that sharp left-hand turn to start that climb. It looks like right now, 36 seconds, stabilising almost 500 metres on the road. That's going to discourage anyone from trying to jump across on this final section. It looks like, kind of impetus just beginning to wane ever so slightly in this chase group, but still final podium place up for grabs within this group.
See Guillaume Martin looking for somebody to come through, and of course that man was Luchenko. 3rd place is 1,360 euros in this race, and 5,443 to the winner, 2,724 to 2nd place. That's those of you that want to know the prize money. Well, as you said, Ian, the gap has stabilised, 35, 36 seconds. It's going to come down to these 2, and it's going to be an interesting tactical battle. They've been out on their own for much of the last 25 kilometres or so. It's a big effort that both of them have had to make, and under 4 to go. Coming towards the climb for the last time. Be time to get that liquid on board and discard the bottles. You can see what's coming up ahead on this section. Back to the chasing group: Luchenko, Martin, Pogacar. Guillaume Martin has put a big effort. It's not going to surprise me one bit if we see on the climb Pogacar just launch off and try and grab 3rd place.
Yeah, I'm sure the armchair ride he's had over the last 25 kilometres from this chasing group, he should be the freshest of the three come the final 200-300 metres. And yeah, you'd say absolute, almost perfect finish for Pogačar. Up a short, steep climb to the line, but don't rule out Matan or Lysenko. Both punchy, fast finishers when they want to be.
Well, all of the favourites that we thought would be in the mix today have lived up to their billing. But it's man of the moment, Pavel Sivakov, in some sublime form, that is in with a chance of taking back-to-back wins here in Tuscany. But Mark Hirschi sat out yesterday's race, didn't defend the Giro della Toscana that he won in 2022. Maybe is just slightly fresher. He was over in Canada as well, as was Sivakov. There's a lot of travel, a lot of time in the saddle for all of these riders at this stage of the season, unless you're one of the riders that's taking a little bit of a break over the summer, of course. Well, under a kilometre till we hit the climb. Peccioli is looming in the not so distant future. It's just up ahead right now. You can see the last stretch of this flat bit of road, and then we'll start the climb.
Yeah, the nerves will be kicking in for these front two riders now. Just obviously you feel the anxiety building towards the end of a bike race like this. You both know what the situation is. You both know what's coming up. You've done multiple laps of this finishing circuit. You know exactly what you've got to contend with come the final 2 kilometres of this race. You're just hoping you can play your cards right.
Well, here we go. Climb up ahead. Who is going to take the win in the 71st Coppa Sabatini? The town of Peccioli coming out to support this race, as it does every year. Sivakov and Hirschi are going to battle for the win. I've got 30 seconds to play with. Also, Hirschi sitting on Sivakov's wheel. How is he going to play this one? He's got a good sprint on him on those uphill finishes. Sivakov, a powerful rider. Is he going to go for the long approach? Or have they both just got nothing left and we're just going to see it play it out to a sprint? Well, the chasing group have stepped up the pace ever so slightly. Lysenko on the front right now. Pogačar, perhaps the man to watch here, given he has been just taking it as easy as a professional cyclist can in this situation. Doing a great job for his teammate Mark Hirschi up in front. And a shame to lose Carapaz from the group as well, after we think, got to stress think, that he perhaps thought the last lap through was actually the final lap. Well, here we go, Ian, prediction time. Who's your man?
I'm going to go for the man in form, Sivakov.
Well, I'll go Hirschi then, just to make it interesting between the two of us.
Perfect.
Where's the fun in me picking Sivakov as well? Well, just see that little look over the shoulder. Less than 1,000 metres to go. A few little cat and mouse games perhaps, but it's been such a big effort from these two riders. Nearly 200 kilometres of racing, over 2,500 metres of climbing, coming down to the final 800 metres or so. They don't want to mess around too much, because there's some seriously powerful riders still behind. And Hirschi watching Sivakov like a hawk. Sivakov looking down the roads just for the next group. Where are those chasers? Unfortunately, we're probably not going to see much of what happens with the chase group. We'll see them on the line. Hirschi takes his turn on the front. It's not really taking turns at this stage. It's all about the tactics. And is this the moment Sivakov tries to distance Hirschi? Hirschi straight back on his wheel. I think, Ian, that was the moment there that Sivakov might have tried to go early.
Yeah, he had to try and play it long. He just kind of held off, laid off the wheel ahead of him and tried to rush into the gap and get a little gap on Hershey. But yeah, that doesn't look good in terms of Sivakov winning this one. Hershey covered that one, looked really quite easy for him. As see Sivakov going once again.
Well, Sivakov goes and Hershey right back on his wheel. He was taking slightly shorter turns and he's now getting a toe, and Sivakov looking over his shoulder. Hershey's got a good sprint on him, but Sivakov can produce some big watts when he needs it. Now Hershey just drifting across. It gets a little steeper. Hershey kicks. Sivakov matches him as well. Sivakov hogging those boards on the left-hand side of the road. And Mark Hershey now out in front. You can see the finish line. Sivakov's not got it today. It's going to be Mark Hershey, Team UAE Emirates, who takes the coppa Sabatini. And it means, Ian, that you're buying the coffees.
Yeah,
and here's the next group coming through, and it's that Pogačar on the front. He can ride anything, and he's going to come through and take third place, kind of like we predicted.
Yeah, just being able to ride the back of that group for so long, save so much energy, and yeah, kicked away in the final few hundred metres to secure a UAE 1-2. I'm sure Sivakov, apart from yesterday, he'll be getting rather fed up of seeing that UAE ride across the line ahead of him.
Well, a fantastic ride from Mark Hershey, coming in pretty decent form as well. It's fair to say. Didn't race yesterday. Perhaps fresher legs helping. Coming off the back of 2 top 10s over in Canada. Now takes the coppa Sabatini as well, showing he is in some nice form. And I think Ian, Pogačar looking pretty happy there, pretty relaxed. It's 2 races in consecutive days into the legs for him, and exactly what he probably wanted from the last couple of days.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's exactly as we see. Replay, the sprint was already done at this point. Hershey had gapped Sivakov coming out of that final corner, almost uncontested in the end. Such was the turn of speed, the kick that Hershey had left over that final 150 metres from that final corner. But yeah, as I was saying, Pogačar be very pleased with kind of 2 days' work. I'm sure it's almost exactly where he wants to be, coming back from a small break and then a small training block into these first set of races. Got another couple of Italian races lined up before he heads to Lombardy, where I'm sure he'll want to try and take yet another monument.
Richard Carapaz crossing the line there. He went hard on the last lap, maybe thinking that was the final lap. But here's the moment again. Here she's celebrating a great victory. It's another podium for Sivakov. What a bad habit to have, hitting the podium in the last few races. Well, here we see, Ian, well, you're the expert, you take us through it.
Yeah, Sivakov just tried to kick before that final corner, but yeah, to no avail, and Hershey was able to come round him, carry his speed through that final turn, and yeah, as I say, no real contest in the end. Very fast finishing Hershey, managed to get the better of Sivakov. Whether Sivakov just feeling it in the legs from yesterday a little bit, seemed to be the stronger rider, doing those longer turns over the course of the final 25 kilometres, but yeah, come the end, the faster finisher on paper took it in the end. Pogačar rounds out the podium with Martin 4th, Lutsenko 5th. I think Calzoni might have come in for 6th ahead of Carapaz. Seen off camber perhaps, but it'd be really interesting to see whether Carapaz was sprinting for the line thinking it was the final lap or not.
It may be one of those things that we never find out. Carapaz finishing in 7th place, Calzoni in 6th for Q36.5.
Yes, it was a super hard race I did last year, so I know the parkour. It always starts very early, the race, and was good. We had 4 riders there. So, and then at the end, yeah, with that day behind, so actually could just sit on. I rode in the front with Pavel, so it was perfect team tactic for us. And super nice to win today here.
And now, for the end of the season, what are your goals?
I still do Pantani, and then Matteotti, and then I do Luxembourg, and then Italian classics at the end.
Great to hear from our race winners. His next race will be the Memorial Marco Pantani in just a couple of days' time. But Ian, he's in great form ahead of the end of the season.
He certainly is. As you see George Bennett coming across the line. For anyone that joined us late, UAE really dominated the early stages of this race and had 4 men in that exceptionally strong group that formed at the head of the race. Bennett was key in driving the pace, driving that away along with Davide Formolo, which ultimately allowed Hershey and Pogacar to go on and contest the win.
Looking down from the helicopter shots of Peccioli. Still waiting on what's left of the main bunch to come through. Mark Hirschi, the 62nd different winner of the Gran Premio Città di Peccioli Coppa Sabatini, to give it his full name. Exceptional.
I think the bunch will be...
Right. Sorry, Ian, go on.
I think the bunch will be racing in for a top 10, that 10th place up for grabs, so still points on offer. And yeah, having a top 10 at this race, as we were saying, the history of this race, as we see that now.
Yeah, the bunch crossing the line.
A bit like one of the Total Energies rider coming in, winning the bunch kick for that 10th place. They had a strong squad on paper. Bergadeau, 2nd at GP Plouay not long ago, 21st yesterday. One of the names that I did have highlighted, who obviously wasn't in that leading group, but I would have been a bit surprised if that was perhaps him, or Ferron perhaps. Alexis Voulemoz making his comeback after a horrible crash at stage 2 of Tour de l'Ain earlier in the year, but none of those featured in that final group.
Yeah, they did have a couple of riders in one of the early breaks. Chilone and Grolier, the 2 stagiaires, trainee riders that have come up from the Vendée squad, the amateur squad that still feeds into Total Energies. We'll wrap it all up when we get the graphics. We'll have a quick presentation as well. That will be it for the day. I really enjoy looking at these pictures. A beautiful part of the world, Tuscany, and we see the top 10. Hirschi, of course, ahead of Sivakov. Pogacar getting 2 UAE Team Emirates riders on the podium. Carapaz and Valgren, 7th and 8th. Bennett, 9th. And Bergadeau gets you called, Ian, in a 10th place.
Always nice when you take a punt.
Yeah, it came off pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah, as I said, man in form. Probably would have been heavily disappointed to miss out on making that move, because he has shown the form recently, and he would have been another strong rider within that leading group, but obviously missed out today and kind of picked up the scraps as such with that winning of the bunch kick. 10th place for him today.
But as you say, still a few points on offer, and always good to test yourself in that sprint situation, particularly tough uphill finish like we've seen today. Well, we'll look at it again. There was a couple of little digs early on the climb from Sivakov, Ian, but he clearly saw that Hirschi had just had the power today.
Yeah, ultimately Sivakov just didn't have that explosiveness. on that final climb to be able to break the draft and get rid of Hershey. And then, yeah, ultimately we were just waiting for Hershey to go come the final few hundred metres, and it's exactly what he did. Kicked off that final corner, and convincing win for the Swiss champion in the end.
There you can see the distance at the finish line, but Sivakov, he tried just with those little moves just to test out Hershey, and realizing Hershey was too strong today. Great victory for the Swiss rider. Fantastic career the 25-year-old Mark Hershey's having. To that stage win, what was it, 2020 at the Tour de France?
It certainly was. Feels a long time ago now. But
certainly does, yeah.
Burst so we're just waiting the scene.
Just waiting on the prize giving to get underway. We've heard from our race winner Mark Hershey. We might hopefully have another interview or two. I'm sure they'll be lurking around ahead of the podium, just to see. We'll get all three riders on the podium, and then I think there might be a separate presentation for Pavel Sivakov, who, with his win and a second place, will take the extra presentation for the Challenge Toscana Memorial Alfredo Martini over the 2 days of competition here in this part of the world. Well, looks like we are just about ready for the prize giving as a few more riders start just making their way in. Well, perhaps not quite yet. Always takes a little bit of time just waiting for the prize giving, but we'll see Mark Hershey get his moment on the top step of the podium. Have a look again at the final results. 2 former winners, not former winners I should say. Alexei Lutsenko, a former winner. Guillaume Martin was 3rd in this race last year and 4th this year. Apologies for getting that wrong. Decent couple of days for Richard Carapaz, but with that chain coming off Ian quite early on, well, on that really steep climb that we had before we hit the finishing circuit, seemed to knock some of the wind out of his sails. He did get back up with the group, but it was that penultimate lap that ultimately took his chance of a podium away.
Yeah, 100%. With around 39 kilometres to go, they hit that super steep 10.9% gradient climb, Muro di Piccolo, where we saw him drop his chain, didn't even change gear, just up out the saddle, and the chain fell off the inside of the chain rings at the front. He had to stop, put his chain back on and chase back to the chasing group, but by the time he got there, Hershey and Sivakov were already off the front of that group and had established a decent gap at that point. I think he'll be kind of wondering what if tonight, whether that hadn't been the case. It looked like he was just about to attack up the right-hand side of the road when he had that mechanical. So, yeah, he'll be disappointed tonight.
And disappointed after second yesterday. Kind of just missed that move from Sivakov. Mark Hershey makes his way onto the podium, taking home a very nice vase. A great ride today from Mark Hershey. In great form ahead of the final stage of the season.
noi lo ripetiamo.
So the Swiss national anthem for Mark Hirschi, today's winner. Any final thoughts from yourself, Ian, before we wrap it up for the day?
Just another cracking day's racing, and I love these end of season Italian races. Always provide a really attritional kind of exciting course for the riders to get stuck into and to really go about the racing full gas and produce a worthy winner each time. It just makes for really interesting racing.
Sivakov and Pogacar join the winner Mark Hirschi on the podium for a few photographs ahead of a busy part of the Italian classic season, building towards Il Lombardia, final monument of the season. It's been great having your company here today, GCN Plus, for today's race. Of course, there's still quite an intriguing race going on over in Spain as well. It's got a few more days to play out, and how many more storylines can that race provide? A lot of talking points. Looked like someone was about to put a microphone in front of Pavel Sivakov. No, doesn't look like he wants to talk at the moment.
Gentili signore e signori, 14 settembre 2023, Gran Premio Città di Peccioli, Coppa Sabatini. Cesare Di Cinzio, avvocato, commissario straordinario della Lega Ciclismo Professionisti, premia il terzo atleta classificato dalla Slovenia, campione nazionale alfiere Wild Team Emirates, Tadej Pogacar. Tadej Pogacar.
Well, that just about wraps it all up from here in Peccioli in Tuscany. From myself, Ian Findlay, and from Ian Field, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your company. We'll see you again very soon.
Secondo, ora di nazionalità francese, alfiere Ineos Grenadiers, Pavel Sivakov. Deuxième place pour le coureur Pavel Sivakov. Riceverà la coppa in cristallo offerta dalla famiglia Frilli. A premiare sarà Renzo Macelloni, sindaco di Peccioli. Primo classificato da Berna, Svizzera, campione nazionale, alfiere Wild Team Emirates, Mark Hirschi. Mark Hirschi.